Hi everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the Ask Homeschool show. Today we're delighted to be talking about all things English Junior Cycle related, and here in studio today is Owen Avison of the Junior Cycle for Teachers Network. Owen, do you want to just start off by introducing yourself and tell us who you work for and who the JCT are and what they do?
Yeah, so my name is Owen Avison. I'm a seconded teacher from Newbridge College at the minute, and I'm working with Junior Cycle for Teachers. So we're a support service of teachers, supporting teachers implement new Junior Cycle changes and reform.
Brilliant, excellent. So one of the things that we said before this, we asked us to send in your questions on the new English Junior Cycle. So we have parents, students and teachers really with questions in with us, and hopefully Owen is going to be here to answer them today. Primarily, we have had a lot of parents getting in touch with us and sending us the questions. So we're going to start off this segment by just focusing on the parents who have sent in the questions and some of their concerns.
Great,
so
yeah.
First question we have is, what will be the main differences between the 2016 English Junior Certificate exam and the 2017 Junior Cycle English exam? So, broad question.
Broad question. I think one of the key differences really in the new Junior Cycle English specification is that it's based off learning outcomes. So there are 39 learning outcomes in the Junior Cycle English specification now, 13 for oral language, 13 for reading and 13 for writing. And the pupils' learning really is based off engaging with those 39 learning outcomes across the 3 year. We have within the 39 a subset of 22 which are particularly tailored for the first year situation, so it most readily matches pupils in their transition from primary education into secondary education, and then a full exploration of all 39 across second and third year then. So that would be, I think, fundamentally a key difference between what the Junior Cert was and what the new Junior Cycle English specification is.
And why the need for a change? I suppose that's...
So it's building on best practice. So it's to have different modes of assessment that will support the learning. So across classroom-based assessments and the final assessment, and importantly formative assessment, day in, day out in the classroom, is trying to have assessment modes that support the learning and not just having perhaps one terminal examination right at the very end. The learning outcomes also, whilst exploring knowledge, also explore understandings, values and skills. So it's a really broad engagement pupils will have now across their learning journey.
Okay, so new forms of assessment, and I suppose that leads into our next question. What is a classroom-based assessment? So
a classroom-based assessment, an acronym that's used is CBA. So the classroom-based assessments, really they're very, very similar to the teaching and learning that typically takes place in the classroom. So as I said, it's based off learning outcomes. A teacher typically in a unit may take learning outcomes from reading, writing and oral language, teach those, assess those, check in on the learning, see how it's happening. So the oral CBA really is part of the typical classroom practice. I suppose the significant difference with a CBA is we're checking in on that learning, try to capture it, discuss it with our colleagues and see where the pupil's learning it is at. So we have a CBA for English now at the end of second year, which is the Oral Communication CBA. We have one in December of third year, which is the Collection of the Students' Text CBA. And they are the two key CBAs now in Junior Cycle English.
So a classroom-based assessment in second year, so that's a significant change between the new course and the old course.
That is a very significant change. So
what happens?
So that's the oral communication classroom-based assessment. Okay. So the pupils can decide on a topic. They can pick one of 4 formats, whether it be a presentation, whether it be a response to a stimulus, whether it be an interview, whether it be a performance, which I particularly like as a teacher. I know in my classroom we had performance as part of our normal teaching and learning quite often in the classroom, and the old Junior Cert, if it was the written paper exam, it was hard to capture that. Okay. Whereas we have a place in the system now in the second year CBA to capture that really rich learning, which will be a positive experience for teachers and pupils.
And we now have a different way of grading these tests or these assessments at the end of second year and third year.
Absolutely. So the classroom-based assessments, they take place in the classroom over a nationally designed window, and then at the end of the 3-week period, teachers will award it one of 4 descriptors. So there are 4 descriptors for a classroom-based assessment: yet to meet expectations, in line with expectations, above expectations, or exceptional.
Now, are those in line with expectations? Are those the teacher's own expectations, or are they nationally? So
they would be a national expectation that understanding of standards will grow over time. The NCCA on their website, curriculumonline.ie, have features of quality, where you can find a really important document, which we might link on the bottom if we can, which is
okay.
the classroom-based assessments and assessment task guidelines document. So in that document, you'll find features of quality. So the descriptor is awarded based on different features of quality within each descriptor level. So each descriptor level has 3 features of quality. A teacher moves through the features of quality and assigns it a descriptor level. And there's exemplars online which would help teachers, I suppose, understand that standard that we talked about.
And there is a question when we deal with teachers here about that. I think I might ask it now, actually.
Yeah.
So when you're coming up with that grade in your assessment or in your classroom-based assessment, is the teacher on his own or on their own just making that decision, or what support do they have in terms of the school in making that?
It's a good question. So one, I suppose, significant change to the landscape of junior cycle education from what it previously was is the introduction of subject learning and assessment review meetings. So SLARs, to use the acronym, absolutely. And SLARs, I suppose, English is the first subject as part of the rollout, but other subjects will be coming online. So SLARs will become a typical feature of the landscape across other subjects as well. And there'll be a lot of room for teachers to discuss how they take their SLARs take place in English and how they might take place in Irish and how they take place in different subjects. But essentially, at the end of the class, where the teacher has provisionally awarded the descriptor, they will bring a sample of that work to a subject learning assessment review meeting, a small sample, discuss those samples with their colleagues and return and look at the provisional grades. So that will give the teachers, I suppose, have broader understanding of standards within the school, standards nationally that will grow over time. It'll give a consistency to the awards that are being given in the schools as well. And I suppose the SLARs, the subject learning and assessment review, as well as being moments to look at the assessment review aspect, they're a very important time to look at the subject learning aspect. So if I take a sample from your class, Paul, and we've looked at it from a SLAR, or maybe it's a pupil performing a poem, my first question might not be around which descriptor level is this. I'd like to talk to you about how did that take place in the classroom.
It's a nice professional conversation.
Professional conversation, which is a key aspect of junior cycle education now.
We've probably moved in and straight into the teaching, the teacher's questions. So we'll go back in terms of the questions from parents. So question number 3 is, my child has completed their CBA in second year. What will happen this year now he is moving into third year?
So as I said, they'll continue to engage with the learning outcomes. So moving out of that subset of 22 learning outcomes for first year, they'll have a broader experience of all the 39 learning outcomes. So that'll be the key feature, I suppose, of their journey. As they move into third year, if they're moving from second year to third year, they'll have a second CBA, classroom-based assessment on the horizon, which is the collection of student texts.
Okay, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Okay, the sample 2017 exam paper, it looks a little bit different to what maybe we're previously used to. Some people have said here the exam paper looks to be a lot easier than previous exams. Is it simply just dumbing down?
Yep. So it's a different landscape now. As I said, we have different assessments in place to capture learning and to support the learning at different times across the learning journey. So that performance we talked about earlier, that is best captured, I suppose, in the oral communication CBA. The collection of student texts, which is the second classroom-based assessment, that is based on the pupil's work from the start of second year up until December of third year. So that's a really natural home to assess the pupil's extended writing pieces, if you like. And again, the final assessment does have an important role to play. I suppose a key message of the reform is that it's summative assessments working hand in hand with formative assessments. So yes, the final assessment is different now, whereas in the junior cycle we had 3 years and maybe one assessment to capture all of that learning. We now have different assessment moments across the 3 years, and we have to, I suppose, look at the final assessment paper in that light. It's a capturing of learning, of certain learning outcomes. So when we look at the specification, there are 39 learning outcomes, but there are learning outcomes that have a star. And the learning outcomes are with a star, they are the learning outcomes upon which the final assessment is based. And year on year, the final assessment will look to assess a sample of those starred learning outcomes. So it will change, because we're talking about learning outcomes now, I suppose, and not content. Year on year, there will be a change there. But I suppose when we compare what the junior cert exam was with the new sample papers that were issued by the SEC, I can certainly see why you'd be caught on the hop as them looking like two different animals. But I think it's that broad understanding of the assessment landscape now might ease that difficulty.
And I suppose one more worried parent has wrote to us and said, my child has not told me anything about a CBA, doesn't know anything about it, this is all news. How do I find out more about how he's done?
Absolutely. So it is a significant change. I suppose if you had a son or daughter who just finished English last year, and you have a son or daughter just finishing this year, as we said, the assessment landscape is quite different. So the NCCA have some great materials on their website at juniorcycle.ie. Also on our website, jct.ie, you can also find resources and supports for parents trying to get a grasp of this broader, different assessment landscape.
And you were saying earlier that in second year, the classroom-based assessment is reported as part of the actual summer reporting.
Absolutely. So
school has.
So to avoid over-assessment for people, so as more and more subjects come online, they'll be doing more and more CBAs across different subjects. So over time, we will see that CBA perhaps replacing what was the summer test. That will be the significant assessment moment for pupils at the end of second year.
Okay, so just to briefly move on to students. So students, what do I have to prepare for?
So what do I have to prepare for students?
I normally sit an exam in June and you're telling me that
so that's the student line, very, very direct line from the students, which I can appreciate. So you best prepare from the moment you enter in first year. So a significant part of the reform is to keep pupils engaged across the 3 years of junior cycle. So the best way to prepare is in each unit of work that you're working with your teachers, when they work with learning outcomes, will be very explicit in that unit about what will constitute success. So whether it's a short story, you have clear advice about what constitutes the best elements of a short story. So as you work across your different units across the 3 years, and your key moments, I suppose, across your CBA as well, that's how you best prepare. And that will best prepare you for the final assessment, that important exam, right at the end of the 3 years.
Okay, another question. Why are you not using ABC grades anymore?
So again, that's another change, I suppose. Instead of having one exam and just A, B, C, D, we're trying to have assessments that really accurately give that real broad picture of how the pupils got on. So when we talk about the classroom-based assessments, we have 4 descriptors, and the language of those descriptors is trying to best represent how you got on in that CBA moment. When we talk about the final assessment, again, instead of maybe getting an A previously, which really doesn't say, an A is just an A, and I know we have allegiances to letters and what they mean, but it doesn't really say a lot apart from being an A, whereas now it may be at the top end of distinction, maybe towards the lower end, it might be partially achieved. And when you get all of your CBAs and your final assessment and other areas of learning, it'll all be going on what is going to be called your junior cycle profile of achievement. So in the autumn, when you return after third year, you'll get this really nice broad picture, and the language in that picture will really accurately represent how you got on across the 3 years. So the language is changing to match the different assessments we have now.
And in 2017, just to point out, it is only English that is changing.
It is only English.
The third year students.
Absolutely,
who are going to be examined. Okay, perfect. If I have a reasonable accommodation for my examinations, do I have one for my CBA, my classroom-based assessment?
Yes.
So reasonable accommodations.
Yeah. So the classroom-based assessments they're school-based awards. So the school can continue to put provisions in place for students to stop maybe any downturn on performance that might take place because of a specific learning or physical disability. So, but it's important to say, I suppose, about the provisions the school has put in place for the CBA, that really the guidelines, that document we talked about has been earlier along the bottom, the guidelines would suggest that the supports being put in place are supports that have been put in place typically for that pupil across the year. So there's no need for a special provision at the time of the CBA. It's what you've been receiving.
Yeah, so there is a difference. I mean, your classroom-based assessment is a school-based exam.
Yeah, absolutely.
And your exam in June is going to be a state examination.
Externally assessed.
Externally assessed by the SEC. Now, there's a question, might as well take it now. Your second classroom-based assessment that you do when in third year?
In December of third year.
December of third year. There is an element of that goes towards the state examination?
So we talked about the landscape, so another important part of the assessment landscape now is something called the assessment task, or the AT, to use another acronym. So after pupils have completed their second classroom-based assessment, they'll do an assessment task. And essentially what the assessment task is, it's a written task that asks pupils to reflect on the process of writing that they found across the collection of the students' texts. It takes place, there's a national frame or window for it to take place this year. For 2016, it's going to be December 5th to December 9th. So every year, there'll be in the same week, ever across the country, schools will be doing the assessment task. It's designed by the NCCA, and once pupils finish the assessment task in school, it's kept in the school until the summer, and it's put in alongside the final assessment, and the assessment task is going to be worth 10% of that final grade from the SEC.
And that's marked externally by the SEC?
That's marked externally. So it's two classes. Again, that guidelines document, which I've highlighted a couple of times being important, would say it would take place over 2 class periods. The first 40 minutes to reflect and think about stimulus questions, and think about their process of writing, look at their own collection and think back on what did I really enjoy about writing, what did I find difficult, what pieces ended up in my collection of text for the CBA. So it gives them time to think in the first 40 minutes, and the second 40 minutes, essentially, they just write out their answers onto the booklet, which is kept in school until the summer.
Okay, so hopefully students, that's of some benefit to you. A sort of final group is the actual English teachers like myself and yourself.
Yeah.
Do I have to record the oral communication CBA?
So the oral communication CBA, you'd be looking to record a sample of them.
This is in second year?
That's at the end of second year.
Okay.
So you have a classroom of pupils. Again, the guidelines would suggest that you'd aim to record a small sample of your pupils, okay? And the guidelines again would say that it would be really what you'd be aiming to record is 1 from each descriptor level. Those 4 descriptor levels we talked about, where feasible. If you don't have something an exceptional or something yet to meet, you don't have it. So as much as possible, as much as is feasible, try to record 1 from each descriptor level. You bring it's that small sample that you bring to the SLAR. Now, teachers can exercise the professional judgment in terms of how many they record, but it's certainly not envisioned that you have to record them all. The guidelines would say it's a small sample for SLAR purposes.
Okay, all right. In a school where there are a number of English teachers, must they all choose the same kind of oral format or task?
No. So again, what the oral CBA is, it's trying to promote pupil engagement in the task. So pupil engagement through the choice of topic that they have for the oral communication, the choice of the format, as we said, whether it be a performance or whether it be a response to a stimulus, whatever which of the 4 formats the student would be which to pick. So there's a huge element of student engagement in this and discussion with the teachers. So it's not necessary to have a prescriptive blanket. I've heard a lot of teachers we've discussed in the past year, and it's quite often called the oral presentation CBA at the minute, but presentation is just one of the 4 formats. So there are 4 formats. It's supposed to be a broad, rich, engaging experience for pupils. So there's no need, there shouldn't be a feel or a need for conformity across the department on that. Okay,
the assessment task, we've mentioned that, it's taken in December of 3rd year.
After the second CBA.
After the second CBA,
yeah.
And it's worth 10% of the total marks on offer for the exam in June.
For the final assessment,
final assessment,
which is going to be 90% and the AT will be 10. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What support and training will the facilitator be given prior to undertaking the role? So, what supports are there for an English school with a number of English teachers?
Yeah.
What did the JCT provide in support?
So we, over the last year, we have delivered a full day's training on facilitation skills specifically for the SLAR to almost 200 teachers nationwide. We have supports. We've turned those supports into screencasts on our website, jct.ie, where you can go find time maybe individually with your colleagues to engage with those materials. There's worksheets that go along with that, templates which are supportive of both the teachers and the facilitator at the SLAR moment. The NCCA also have some really good booklets around teaching and learning on their website, juniorcycle.ie, and there's one booklet they have specifically around facilitation skills which teachers may find of benefit. And we would consistently say as well, teachers are always their own best resource. It's envisioned that the role of the facilitator will rotate. The guidelines will talk about the facilitator rotating year on year, so that professional collaboration you were talking about earlier, Paul, that will grow, that maybe you're the facilitator this year, albeit next year you'll clue me in as to what you find helpful. So this will really be building capacity and growing in schools across the years.
And that was the final question really. I mean, who appoints the English facilitator?
So that's a school-based decision. Okay. So the facilitator will arise within the school. Yep.
Okay, well listen, hopefully, Owen, thanks a million for coming.
Not at all.
Hopefully
anytime.
We've given you a bit of clarity. Again, we will be putting this episode up on YouTube, and we'll put down all the links that we talked about in today's session. But listen, Owen, thanks a million.
Yep.
Good luck. You're busy. A
Thanks
busy year ahead.
Thanks
and I know this is an ongoing process over the next few years.
Absolutely, and it certainly is a medium-term reform, Paul. And if teachers have any further questions, they can get in contact at info@jct.ie. I'm sure Paul will link that for us in the description as well.
Okay, lovely. Owen, thanks a million.
Thanks a million, Paul.
Okay, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.